Critical new black box information just out moments ago on what happened on Air India flight 171. This is a big deal and we've got to talk about it. Hey everyone, I'm Meet Kevin. I'm a multi-engine rated jet pilot and am rated as a single engine pilot in command, which means I could technically fly the plane alone. In this video, I'm going to give you perspective into why what happened could happen in any Boeing situation, in a two-pilot in command situation, and it's really scary. But first, let's get into what the Wall Street Journal just broke because it's a big deal. First, the Wall Street Journal is just now arguing that a black box recording of dialogue between the flight's two pilots indicates the captain was the one that switched off the control fuel flowing to the plane's two engines, according to people familiar with U.S.'s officials' early assessment of evidence recovered in the accident investigation. Now, what's interesting about this is the United States investigators have really gotten the cold shoulders with these black boxes. It took India 2 to 5 days to find the two black boxes, 2 for the first, 5 days for the second. Then India said they were going to send the black boxes to America, but then they changed their mind and refused and said that they were going to conduct the investigation locally. Then they gave us a preliminary report that was extremely, almost purposefully vague about what happened in this aircraft. First of all, if they have the black boxes and the cockpit voice recorder, why would they only tell us, quote, the engine 1 and engine 2 fuel cutoff switches transition from run to cutoff one after another with a time gap of 0.1 seconds? Why did they not say there were no CAS messages before this indicating any kind of crew alerting system message, CAS message, suggesting there was a problem and an emergency procedure needed to be followed? Why didn't they mention that it was the co-pilot who was at the moment flying and it was the captain who switched those switches to the off position? Why are we getting this through leaks? Now, we knew who was flying, but why are we getting through leaks that it was indeed the non-flying pilot who turned these switches off? This is very odd to me. And why this is very odd is because we know that there are emergency procedures on the Boeing 787 that say if you have a dual engine failure, you're going to perform emergency procedures that are actually quite different from that of like a 737 or a Phenom 300 like the aircraft that I fly. This is a very unique set of instructions, but is very specific. In the event of a dual engine failure, you're going to move both fuel control switches to cut off and then run. You generally do this within about a 1 second delay. So you'd go off, on, then push and hold the ram air turbine. This is a normal procedure. But what this preliminary report never told us was why did it take 10 seconds for these switches to go from cut off to run again? Well, probably because something happened in that cockpit and they don't want us to know exactly what's going on. And this is very frustrating to me as a pilot. Now, I'll show you a video in just a moment, but what I want to do first is continue some of this new information in this breaking Wall Street Journal piece out just minutes ago. The first officer was the one who was flying the Boeing, and the more experienced captain moved the switches to the cutoff position. The first officer expressed surprise and then panicked, while the captain denied and seemed to remain calm. This is really interesting because there's no indication as to why this would have been done. The captain or the pilot flying would have had his hands basically full flying the aircraft, and I've mentioned this on this channel before. You can look it up if you look up Meet Kevin, terrorism, Air India 171. I hate to say it, but what I talked about was how very easy it would be for the pilot not flying to pull back on these levers while the pilot flying took off and rotated the aircraft. It is extremely common for the pilot that is not flying to have, frankly, much less to do than the pilot flying. And I say this as a single rated pilot. So when I fly, I generally take responsibility for the vast majority of the actions that take place, even when I'm flying in a two-pilot situation, so I can practice training for single pilot operations. And so I want you to see on a takeoff how busy my hands are here. And then we're going to talk about how the Wall Street Journal suggests criminal authorities in the United States might be getting involved, as they would if this incident happened on U.S. soil. And this is a huge embarrassment to, frankly, aviation in India. But listen to this takeoff from
Heading agrees.
And that guy who's landing's not close yet, so we're good.
Yep, no factor.
So I had an outside POV of this takeoff as well.
All right, 5 to go.
What I want you to see is my hands. We set the throttle. Once we get to V1, you'll see my hand move to the yoke. Both hands are on the yoke, which opens up plenty of room if you had somebody who was just having a very bad day to switch the fuel switches, or in our case, the ignition switches right here. You can see there's little to do for the other pilot.
V1, rotate.
See, look at that.
V2.
I'm doing our gear.
That's right.
In this case, we're going for flaps. We're going for gear and flaps early.
Oh, I trained that plane.
All me right
That's my
here.
trainer.
7 right, left turn approved.
And the point is, I'm looking out of the cockpit. I'm looking at my instruments. I'm dealing with the gear. I'm dealing with the flaps in this case. Now, typically in a Boeing aircraft, the other pilot would have dealt with the gear and the flaps, but they would have had plenty of room to hit these switches as well. My eyes are not on those. I'm pulling the power back right here because we get out of the toga setting and we get into more of a climb setting for thrust. This is very normal so we don't overheat our engines. These are all very typical procedures, but the reason I'm showing you this is I'm flying this aircraft. I'm also communicating with radio, with tower, and switching over to our other frequencies. I'm doing this again as a single rated pilot where I take these responsibility. But you'll see throughout all of these procedures, the other pilot is in a position where you could have all of the opportunities at your heart's desire to get to those fuel switches and intentionally move those fuel switches to the off or cutoff position. Now, Air India just this morning also reported that the fuel cutoff switches on all of the other Boeing aircraft for Air India have been inspected, and despite that safety bulletin from 2018 suggesting that there could be faulty switches with the Boeing cutoff switches, Air India found no problems at any of the other aircraft. And that's because the aviation authorities gave Boeing, Air India in this case, just 1 week to inspect all of them. They got it done within 2 or 3 days. Not a single issue at any of the other aircraft. At least that's what we're being told. But here you can see the FBI is suggesting, or rather the Wall Street Journal is suggesting that U.S. officials and criminal authorities have been briefed and should review the matter. The Air India authorities' preliminary report didn't reach any conclusions about what led to the crash or why the fuel switches were cut off. It almost seems like they want this out of our memory and they want to release this information later. It's very disturbing because at this point, it's very clear. This was a case of a 56-year-old soft-spoken man caring for his ailing father who used to work for India's civil aviation ministry himself, who decided it was time to check out. And unfortunately, he decided to take almost 300 people with him. We'll never know what happened with this individual's mental health, but apparently he was known as somebody who was polite, soft-spoken, never cursed, never drank alcohol, and somebody who had a love for flying and explained concepts better than even some instructors. Here's a photo of that pilot. And all of a sudden, something flipped. And yes, it was the fuel cutoff switch. Okay, all right, sorry. Look, this sucks, okay? We need to figure out and how to get to the bottom. We need to figure out why. Why can this happen? I don't know if this is just the human nature of what can unfortunately happen to people, but this has happened in history before where you essentially have suicide murders. And it's terrible. But this is scary. And together as an aviation community, we have to look and realize this was more of a mental health problem than ultimately it was a mechanical problem. And so, yeah, I understand why people are calling for cockpits and air cockpit cameras. I understand why people are calling for more mental health screening because, frankly, here was a pilot with 15,000 hours, over 8,600 hours in the Boeing 787 in type. And this is how they decided to check out. This is really devastating. Maybe we do need to step up our medical screening for pilots. This is devastating. Breaking news. Follow for more.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.